a card like this, Plaxcaster. Sorry, welcome to a high point of the show where I can't speak words above 3 syllables. I'm a very tongue-tied individual. I apologize about that. Greetings and hello once again, everybody, the friends of the MTG Thoughtcast. I am once again not Joseph. This is John coming at you once again from the MTG Thoughtcast. I've got myself another special guest lined up for you today while he's still out attending to all of his snowstorm shenanigans. But today on the show, I've got myself a special guest you might recognize. This is Dana Roach from the EDH Recast. And we are so privileged and honored to have you come and join us here on the show. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it. And as I'm looking at the camera right now, I'm realizing on the show we record, Joey usually crops our frames in. So here you can actually see the giant pile of cards on my desk that I have not yet sorted out.
It adds character.
Yeah, absolutely.
It adds character.
I'm sure a bunch of listeners right now are in the same boat. They're like at their desk with a pile of cards as well. So
look, my Lorewood stuff sat right over there. So I understand, my guy. I understand it. So, all right. Well, welcome once again, friends of the MTG Thoughtcast. And this is a grand return to one of our color series episodes. This is a type of subcategory of our podcast that we've been doing for a little while now. We've been running through all of the major colors and color combinations that you could be playing cards for in Commander. And we've been pulling some of our favorites and most iconic that we think you need to hear more about. Would you like to understand and hear more about these cards like this? Be sure to drop down into the comments section in the description box to give likes, comments, and subscribes. Follow along with everything that we do here at the show. You can also reach out to me and Joseph directly on our Discord channel. That link is also in the description box down below. The last little shouts that we do before the start of our show here is we have to say a special thank you to our sponsors of the channel, Heavy Play. Some of the most innovative and creative in tabletop accessories with their Equip Mag system, linking together all of their tabletop accessory items, and the curved sleeves, some of the most comfortable in card protection. You can visit the link in the description box down below for heavyplay.com/MTG Thoughtcast, or use our checkout code MTG Thoughtcast for 10% off your entire order. Shout out to them. Thank you so much. So, as we get rolling in here, Dana, just as a first question to you, do you play a lot of Simic?
One of the first Commander decks I ever built, 12 years ago was Edric's Master of Trest, which is a Simic commander.
Ooh.
And the problem wound up being Edric's very, very strong. And so I built the deck and I had it, but I actually didn't have cause to play it very often because I found that most of the pods I were in weren't at a power level to play that deck. So I had a Simic deck for a lot of years, and it went literally 3 or 4 years sometimes where I hadn't played it in games. So finally, a couple years back, I was like, I want a Simic deck of some sort, and I need something that I actually am going to play, aside from this Edric deck that just sits there collecting dust, on the off chance I come into a just slightly sub-CEDH pod where I can play this. So I finally got around to putting another one together. I built one using Ichtekik, the legendary splicer, partnered with Malcolm, and it's a ton of fun. So yes, I played that deck. It's one of my most played decks the last year or so.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's actually quite funny. I almost want to say I have a very similar scenario to myself as well, because my own getting started in Magic was kind of in that time frame of it was original Theros, some of those core sets, Khans of Tarkir, but in that wheelhouse of time was also the original Conspiracy booster set, of which Edric was in that booster product. And so I ended up latching more over towards Brago, but copies of Edric from those draft nights had always been sitting around and like, ooh, that could be fun and exciting. He was such an excellent choice to have in a booster set like that, given the context of how you would do Conspiracy. But for myself, I don't really know per se about like a Simic just raw, just green blue out the gate. That is, to me, one of my philosophies I feel like about Simic is that it feels more of an excellent include support color. It's quite difficult to make a commander, in my opinion, of Simic that isn't just like, as you were describing, right? Something too degenerately powerful right out the gate. Heck, right? Isn't Kinnan like one of the most prominent CDH commanders of all time? But
yeah, it also feels like so many of Simic commanders are just like Tatiova with extra steps. It's just play land, draw a card. It's like, I know that's not true, but it feels that way. Like they're all just that card in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, where I think Simic thrives is being some of your support to help aid in everything else that you're doing, right? Like some of the greatest color combinations that you can play that are like even in above Simic itself. You've got like Bant and Temur and Sultai, and generally speaking, Simic focused cards, the ones in both either mono green, mono blue, or what we're about to talk about today, the combination of the two of them, they provide that excellent like backbone skeleton to the overall theme of what you're looking to do.
It's very interesting too, because as I was going through Simic cards to look for this, there's not a lot of like combined Simic cards that don't do really niche things. And I think of like Orzhov, for example. You get a ton of utility cards in Orzhov, particularly removal, whether it's like all the Vindicate variants, Despark or Anguish Unmaking or Outer End or whatever. Because white and black do those things, so they put them both on a card. And you get that in Golgari to a degree too. You get the Putrefies, the Assassin's Trophies, whatever. That's not a thing that you really see in Simic. You don't get Simic cards that combine what blue and green do. There's nothing that's like, for the most part, doing a, green can destroy artifacts and enchantments, blue can destroy creatures. There's no Simic card that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or creature like you would see in other combination pairings. Not yet, right? Yeah. So that was interesting. I don't know if I had ever noticed that before. That like for whatever reason, design has just not combined those things on a Simic card like it seems they have in Golgari cards or in Rakdos cards or Orzhov cards or whatever it is.
Yeah, I tend to agree that just like what it feels like when you bring these two colors together, right, with green having its high synergy focus of doing ramp and big creatures and counters, where you get blue added into that as well, where it comes with like evasion, countering spells, not the counters on cards per se, like these kinds of things, you bring them together and it almost kind of, in a weird contrast to how the philosophy of the Simic as a guild are, like it almost feels too generic for some of these cards. It's just like these green-blue ones that just say, you just get a card and here's a 4/4 with flying on top of that as well. Yep. It's like, it's fascinating to dive in and sort of find some of the more icon and standout pieces that this color combo has to offer. I'll throw the conversation then to you first. As my guest of the episode, would you like to start us off with one of your first picks?
Sure. And I mentioned an Edric Spymaster of Trest deck, and this was a card I ran in that deck, but I still think it's a pretty solid card, and that's Biomass Mutation. It's Simic, so it's 2 hybrid mana and X, and it's an instant speed spell, and creatures you control have base power and toughness XX till end of turn. Now, green, like if you're playing Simic, you have access to greens, overrun kind of effects, Crater Hoof, all that kind of stuff. But they're almost always sorcery speed, and really often they're keyed on you having a big body in play. So like Overwhelming Stampede is going to buff your creatures XX, where X is their greatest power among creatures you control. That doesn't necessarily help you very much if you're playing a fairy deck or a merfolk deck or like something with a bunch of small bodies, like that Edric deck. Okay, it's going to give them +3/+3, but that feels a little underwhelming. Whereas Biomass Mutation, you can just pump as much mana as you have into it and turn those creatures into 6/6s, 7/7s, whatever it is. And you can do it at instant speed as a defensive response to, something coming down that's going to be doing damage to creatures as well. There's a lot of utility in that card, and I wouldn't be running it in like a Simic Stompy deck of some sort where I could be using the traditional overruns. But there's plenty of Simic decks where I think it does a lot of work and does a thing that no other spell that's doing that does at instant speed.
I sort of like looking at a card like this because I've missed this one before actually being an instant. I think something like this would suit incredibly well into some of those ones that we've seen cropped up lately, the sort of like soul tie that they are trying to get in with lower like power evasive creatures to do some kind of game effect for connecting with somebody, like Gaunty Canny Inquisitor comes to mind, where it's like that is a deck that wants to play little dinkies who can slip through the defenses of your opponents. A card like this, like Biomass Mutation, you wait until after the declare blocks are finished. Right. Those creatures can because they say they can't be blocked on it, throw a bunch of mana into a spell like this as well. I like it, like a one shot, like Mirror Entity sort of, but just you can do it after no blocks have been declared. Right. Haha! Surprise! Giant Lizard instead.
Yeah, someone does the math, like, okay, I've got 4 creatures and there are 2/2s coming at me in the air. I'll just take the 8. I'm like, well, actually, you're taking 36.
And also on an X spell as well, by the way. These types of things have incredible versatility and usefulness. We've got Mana Dorks and Mana Acceleration that help you feed a bunch of extra mana into this. But that's a very sick one. I like that one a lot.
How about you? What do you have here for me?
Well, okay, all right, the thing we kind of like to do here, we sort of like to try to like segue off of each other whenever possible. So just talking about an evasive little threat that you would love to get pumped up by a Biomass Mutation, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite evasive creatures of all time, and that is Cold-Eyed Selkie.
Cold-Eyed Selkie is great.
So Cold-Eye Selkie is a 1 mana and then 2 hybrids of Simic. So green, blue to cast. 3 mana total. Is a 1/1 with Island Walk. A creature with this ability cannot be blocked if the defending player controls an island. That's true of all the other types of land walk types ability, most prominently when they bring this mechanic back, if it ever. I don't actually even know when the last time they brought back a land walk ability is, but... So this card is a 1/1 then with Island Walk, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you draw that many cards. So instead of something like a Shadow Mage Infiltrator that just straight up draws you a single card, as this one grows bigger with your other forms of like creature buffs or 1/1 counters, or in the case where I enjoy this as an Enchantress target, this thing is just going to continue to get larger, and you will draw equal amounts of cards to the combat damage that it deals to an opponent. That just is so cool to me. I love these little evasive threats that can draw yourself cards, but Cold-Eye Selkie being able to grow the excess amount of cards that you can draw off of it while also still dealing the combat damage, it's why it's one of my favorite Enchantress Voltron targets.
I mean, you mentioned Shadow Mage Infiltrator, which is also a 3 mana to cast, and does something very similar. It's virtually unblockable, and it draws you a card. Shadow Mage Infiltrator is an excellent card, but it doesn't scale, like you said, beyond this. This is a better Shadow Mage Infiltrator for all intents and purposes, because it has the ability to, if you hit it with that Biomass Mutation, well, you draw 9 cards or something crazy, right? Like anything that you have the ability to be good enough at its base level and then scales upwards feels so good in EDH.
Absolutely, yeah. I had mentioned why one of my copies of this lives in my Bant Enchantress Voltron shell, where it's like it's the Enchantress card specifically banking on auras, throwing all kinds of stuff onto there, like granting hexproof onto the thing with alpha authority, or growing it based on the amount of enchantments you've got in play with like ethereal armor and things of that nature. But this also fits into the shell of Merfolk. We've seen like both Simic and Bant Even most recently, we've seen blue and white merfolk. You would obviously have to add a color there from the merfolk from Lorwyn. But green-blue merfolk support and buffing cards from the Ixalan sets. That's where it was most popular to play those two colors with merfolk. You just throw down any of those like... I'm going to be blanking on remembering merfolk lords. It's like, not Master of Waves. Oh no, Lord of Atlantis and friends like that nature. I don't traditionally play merfolk. Sorry. I apologize to all of our merfolk enjoyers that I don't know a merfolk lord, but those kinds of things, or just creature buffs in general, green and blue we mentioned is some of the most prominent colors for +1/+1 counters. So here's a fantastic target that holds those kinds of counters, plus other evasion counters, by the way, other evasion keywords onto it. Just because it itself has island walk doesn't mean you still can't give it something like like flying or double strike. Oh, double strike on this thing is nuts, dude.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because again, then it's doubly scaling. If it's a 2/2, you're drawing 4 cards. Like just again, anything that like builds upward from an already good enough base just feels excellent.
Yep, excellent. Big fan of this. The ability that it offers is just open-ended enough that no matter what kind of like buffing strategy you're looking to do, this little dinky friend is going to get through 9 times out of 10 unblockable and keep your hand fresh for the rest of the game.
So I have an interesting card here talking about buffing up things. And this was a very frustrating card to see way back in the Return to Ravnica block. I think it was from Gatecrash, and the card's Bioshift, because it's so specific. And I ignored it. Whenever I've seen one, I just didn't. It's one of those cards that you default to assume is just a piece of draft chaff. It's a single hybrid Simic mana, and it lets you move any number of +1 counters from target creature onto another target creature with the same controller. So like, that's something that someone will do something in draft, but it's useless beyond that. Except for I have a friend with a Simic +1 counter stack, and the amount of times that he's blown me out with this card made me completely reevaluate how good it is. Obviously, you need to be in a +1 counter set to take advantage of it. But there's so many times he will swing with something, and like we talked about with Biomass mutation, you think you're taking 6 damage, and it turns into 14 or something because the counters get moved over. Or you go to destroy a creature, lightning bolt something, or even like a Blasphemous Act, and he just, I'm going to lose my creatures. I might as well put all of the counters onto one creature and let it survive, and move them over with Bioshift. Occasionally, somebody else will have a +1 counters deck out, and he can move those creatures off one of their creatures that's swinging into something that's not attacking or something. And the other thing that I didn't realize until he played this was the act of moving counters isn't just moving counters. You're creating those counters on that creature. So if you have a doubling
I was actually just about to ask that. Is like, does that
that
triggers all of the things that would say like, if you would put 1 counter, like you would do that +1, that kind of thing,
absolutely.
like a hardened scales?
Yeah, so or doubling season even. So if you're moving 8 counters over, it turns into 16 with a doubling season.
Wow.
Or I've seen him do it with multiple, like the doubling season and the other versions of that, where suddenly it goes from 6 counters to 24 counters or something, just like out of nowhere for 1 single mana when you think you're fine. This isn't the card you're gonna like just jam into any deck, but in a +1 counters deck, a Simic +1 counters deck, it is. I've seen it do so much work. It's shocking for a 6-cent common from a set a dozen years ago.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Like the immediate thing that I could think of with something like this here is we see a variety of utility creature cards who bank up 1/1 counters on themselves, but they're not the ones going into combat. Like a particular standout favorite of mine is Kami of Whispered Hopes. Or to that end, Gyre Sage, kind of the same thing. The ones that are able to produce you mana equal to the amount of counters that are on it. Those are, yes, obviously still +1/+1 counters, but generally speaking, mana dorks are not kind of the things that are going into combat. So you build up all this excess mana on that mana dork, get in with something little, and then do the trick that you exactly had just said. You bioshift the counters that are currently sitting there on that mana dork, and now it's being at instant speed moved to an unblocked attacker. And especially if that is your commander, because let's not forget that 21 commander damage is definitely a way to end a game.
Yeah.
So in these kinds of colors here, where somebody might be thinking, oh, they're small little green, blue, flying legend, whatever, you know, like Raw-esque Apex hybrid or something to that degree that's like wants to be doing proliferating and it has a evasion tacked onto himself. Suddenly just here's 15 counters from my Gyre Sage because he's been building it up over the course of the game at instant speed. That's very cool.
Yeah, I love cards that are so easily dismissed, and I dismiss this one, that in the right deck suddenly just turn into absolute haymakers.
Well, we're on the subject of counters related cards. We've talked about all these ways of being able to move all these counters around to the creatures that you want to. What would be another interesting and exciting way to keep all of those cards safe until you are ready to close out a game? Another long-time classic of the format, Plaxcaster Frogling.
As soon as you said keep your stuff safe, I knew where you were going because I also have Plaxcaster Frogling on my list. In a +1 counters deck, that is such a good piece of tech.
So Plaxcaster Frogling is 1 green and a blue for a 0/0 frog mutant, an ability called Graft. This one specifically, Graft 3. When it enters with 3 1/1 counters on it, and then whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may move a 1/1 counter from this creature onto that one. And an activated ability for 2 generic, no tapping required, very huge upside on a card like this here. 2 generic, a target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gains Shroud until end of turn. Shroud being that it cannot be targets of spells or abilities, period. So you can't target it, your opponents can't target it. Shroud is incredibly strong. You know, all of us know the powerhouse of Lightning Greaves. Mm-hmm. So having that just on tap for anything of yours that's got 1/1 counters placed onto it is cool. Not even to mention the fact as well that this card by itself can be its own target and be the thing that provides that 1/1 counter to another creature when you need it to. I feel like, unironically more than anything, I think the Graft is probably one of the weakest aspects of this card, because like you obviously don't want to kill the Frogling. Like he's only got the 3 counters as a 0/0, but it's nice to have that utility in a pinch. Yeah,
for sure. It's the fact that it does multiple things in your deck. So yes, you can move, you're not going to probably want to move all 3 counters off it, obviously, but there's times you're playing this kind of counter deck and you'll have a creature in there that does something with counters, but maybe doesn't have any by default on itself. Well, this will let you get that first counter onto it. So then you can start proliferating those up or like rolling those up on that creature. But for the most part, it's just the fact that like it provides protection while also coming into play with +1 counters, so it can also grow just incidentally from your other proliferator effects. Or, it comes into play when you've got the doubling season already down and say it drops as a 6/6 or something that can then protect your stuff. It's just very synergistic with what you're doing in a +1 counters deck. Yeah, just having cards in your deck that do multiple things the deck wants. Like you want as many things in a list that have multiple trees. In this case, protecting your creatures, also potentially getting large because it has counters on it, also potentially putting counters on something else that needs to get started and get that seed growing. It's everything you're going to want to have in a Simic +1 counters deck.
It's cards like these who have the repeatable activated ability that you could take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kinds of ones I love sitting behind with a Wilderness Reclamation. These kinds of things that you can just go full stop during your turn, and then you've got that kind of reassurance on the back end that when the Wilderness Reclamation starts kicking off, a card like this, Plaxcaster. Sorry, welcome to a high point of the show where I can't speak words above 3 syllables. I'm a very tongue-tied individual. I apologize about that. Plaxcaster being able to activate its ability on repeat multiple times during the off turn is a huge advantage to playing cards like Wilderness Reclamation or Seedborn Muse or things of that nature that give you resources on the off turn. So very, very great protection on that as well.
Since we're talking +1 counter stuff, and I would imagine this is going to be a bit of a trend because that's kind of what Simic is known for. One I like is the spell Repulsive Mutation. It's an instant speed Simic and X, and you put X +1 counters on target creature you control, then counter up to one target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So I mean, functionally, you're going to counter that spell. And this isn't a good counter spell. It's a good way to put +1 counters on a creature that also counters a spell as an added bonus. And I think if you look at it like a counter spell, it doesn't look like a good card, and it's not. But I think there's a handful of these cards in Magic that you need to look at them backwards. My favorite example of this, there's a blue spell called Overwhelming Intellect that counters a creature spell, and you draw cards equal to the creature's, I can't remember if it's power or mana value. That's a lousy counter spell because it's 6 mana. You don't want to like rely on that to stop a creature from coming down. But it's a really good draw spell that also eats a creature. Like you can almost always look around the board and be like, oh, this person's going to cast their commander for sure this turn or something else. I'm just going to stop that from happening and draw 7 cards in the process. This is a similar thing. Like you're like, oh, I want to put counters on this creature. And at some point in the trip around the board, someone's going to cast something I don't want to resolve. So I might as well put 5 counters or 6 counters on my creature that might get doubled or tripled because you're playing Simic counters, and stop that spell at the same time. Again, it's doing multiple things on one single card, and those are both very useful things it's doing.
It's incredibly useful in the fact as well, in that same regard as Biomass mutation that you were talking about as well, that the countering a spell part on this card isn't up to, so you don't even have to have a spell on the stack. If you just simply need this to be a green-blue X put counters onto a card type of card, it does that. So that's its floor. The floor is just an X-based +1/+1 counters synergy. The ceiling, as you had described, is, oh, let's just have this be, heck, you could probably even do this for 0 if you really needed to. If you know for certain, if you're already sitting on the biggest fat boy at the entire table, this can just be an X0 potential counterspell.
Right, yeah. There's plenty of times in a Simic +1 counters deck that's the case. It's just going to counter a spell full stop without you caring about anything else. It's just so flexible. I think that it's a very, very useful card in that kind of deck.
Awesome. Well, we're still doing counters. We've come to learn from today's episode that Simic is good at one thing almost exclusively. It's 1/1 counters. But I do have a bit of a change up here to this one. This card that I'm about to talk about, it does do 1/1 counters, but its main focus point of what it is not directly caring about the counters per se. I am a huge enjoyer of clones. I think clone spells are some of the most underrated as far as Commander is concerned, because to me, they sort of fill that same hole as like tutor spells. Whereas because Commander is done as a singleton format, cards that allow you to break that restriction as far as I have a second copy of my favorite creature, or this tutor spell goes and gets a card that I need, essentially acting as copy number 2 of that card in the deck. Clones, to that end, especially the ones that can hit the battlefield, not only do they fill that hole of, oh, if you would like to have another copy of one of your favorite creatures in play, but also if your opponent is also up to something stupid, you get to be able to do the same thing, even in colors that wouldn't necessarily match, you know? If you're just raw Simic and somebody is playing something really dumb with black, a clone has a really good opportunity to give you like resources and options that are outside of your color combos. So for myself, one of my favorite clones in tying to the episode that we're talking about is Altered Ego.
I've not seen Altered Ego in a while. That's a really solid card.
I love this little friend here. So Altered Ego is X2 green and a blue for a shapeshifter, 0/0. Floor before anything else, the spell can't be countered, which is a huge benefit over top of a traditional card like Clone. Being able to guarantee, you know, I know there's corner case scenarios. I see you out there, commenters. Being able to get whatever it is you're looking to make a clone target of uncounterable is very huge. But then the card itself is you can have this enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it enters with X additional +1/+1 counters on it. That's where the X in the mana cost comes to. So it's really neat with a card like this because, like we were talking about with the repulsive mutation you were mentioning, is if you want the X to just be 0, just do that. You know, repulsive, not repulsive, altered ego, you can cast this for just clone mana of 2, a green and a blue, 4 mana total. And it can just come in as an uncounterable copy of anything you've got or anything your opponent has down on their side of the battlefield. But the ability, tying back kind of to like what we were talking about with Plaxcaster Frogling, this is another card that, say, if you've got a synergy on your side of the field that is looking to start getting 1/1 counters placed onto it, or in kind of what the sort of the representation of what this card is trying to depict is you are making a evil version of somebody else's, like you're cloning somebody else's Razaketh, but yours has a slightly bigger evil mustache. That's what I'd like to imagine a card like this is here. But yeah, just for the amount of excess mana that you have to be able to put into a card like this, you get to make a duplicate of anything relevant down in play, just potentially larger than the one that already exists down in play.
Yeah, and I think the important point you made was comparing it to clone. The worst case scenario here is it's a clone that can't be countered for the exact same cost as clone. And clone's in like 30-some thousand decks in EDH rack. Like, clone sees a significant amount of play. Now, granted, some of that's in, decks don't have access to green. But like, if that's good enough for clone, it's a clone that can't be countered. And that's the worst case scenario. And it's, again, scales upwards from there. It comes into play with counters on it. If you're playing a +1 counters deck, it could be a creature that cares about counters in some additionally relevant way. I want to make this a copy of some, a Hydra that's going to do some disgusting thing with those +1 counters on it, double them whenever it attacks or something. Colonian Hydra kind of effects. Yeah, the base is good enough. The worst case scenario is good enough to run this card, and you're never casting it for the worst case scenario.
I really like this card in a shell like Animar, Soul of Elements, that like 9 times out of 10, you're not super willing to go and make a traditional non-legendary clone of your commander to let your own one go back to the command zone. But I feel like Animar might actually be the one exception to that,
sure,
where if you've already got Animar down and maybe, let's say it's already got a few counters, maybe 1 or 2 placed on it, your altered ego, now being cost reduced from your original Animar, can come in as an uncounterable, larger already Animar. Then you just keep that one around, and that just increases the amount of cost reduction for your future creatures from that point forward. I really like that synergy. Zaxara the Exemplary being another great choice here because this is a clone with X in its cost as well. So you've got X cost synergy plus being able to make copies, maybe not necessarily Zaxara itself, but an X cost clone that you can clone somebody else's card, and then your Zaxara is giving you the other tokens on the back end of that as well, just like compounded value upon value, which can definitely be described as a theme of what Simic is good at, just value stacked on value, Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the reputation Simic has. Like, it's just the value color combination. Everything it does is built around just generating you value. And oftentimes that's kind of what the win condition is in Simic. It's just outvaluing the table till you can like win the game because you're so far ahead from everybody else that you're just going to put down too many creatures or too many large creatures or too much of everything. That's the Simic way.
Extra crab hands holding all those extra cards you've got.
Absolutely,
I love it.
Yeah. On the +1 counters, doing too much stuff theme here. When the original cycle of MDFCs or the flip lands that came out back in Ixalan, obviously Grog Rights Itlimoc got a lot of attention for being a Gaia's Cradle, and that entire sequence of lands, there's a handful of really, really good near busted ones in there. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, though, the 2-color ones kind of fell under the radar a little bit. Hadana's Climb being the one I'm talking about here specifically. And it's the legendary enchantment on one side comes into play. It's 3 mana, 1 in a Simic. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1 counter on target creature you control. And then if that creature has 3 or more counters on it, you transform it to a land. I don't think I've ever seen this come down and not just immediately transform. People cast it in that +1 counters deck, and then it immediately flips over into a land that turns a creature into a kill condition, more or less. You're putting counters on the creature that already probably had counters on it. You're, playing a deck that's got hardened scales kind of effects or doubling season kind of effects out. So it's almost never just going to be one counter or two counters on something. It's going to be more than that. It's going to flip. That creature is going to swing and be given evasion by the other side of Hadana's Climb because it gives flying and it basically doubles that creature's power. And you kill somebody. Like, that's just how this card tends to work whenever I've seen it come down. But despite how good it is, it got way less attention, I feel like, than a bunch of the other lands. And it's an absolute monster in a +1 counters deck in Simic.
Yeah, these are all these ones you had mentioned. Yeah, these transformable, like the permanents that become their lands from Ixalan. They were such really cool designs. I think my only issue that I feel with Hadana's Climb is that, like, a person like me evaluates the card at the front, and it's like, I just want to keep it on that front side that I get a guarantee counter. Not discrediting to the fact that, getting a bonus land that jumps a creature and doubles its power, that is still crazy strong. Don't misunderstand. Yeah. But I just, I'm a real simple brain kind of guy that, I like to see the cards as their front face value is concerned. And it's like, oh man, I got this enchantment that can continually throw counters onto a creature. That should be looked at not necessarily as the weaker side of what the card is capable of doing, but just how quickly can you get 3 counters onto a creature to get this fun land that is going to instantly be a good form of evasion. Plus, again, you had mentioned a power doubler. For whatever you've already got kicking around. This one's very cool.
That would be interesting if it was a May effect. So early on in the game or something, you're like, I don't want to flip it yet because I'm not going for a big strike. I just want to have it here to continuously roll up my creatures. Actually, that I had never really thought about that before, but that would make it even better. But I think as it stands right now, it is a really good card that just gets overlooked because Growing Rights is such a crazy card and so eye-catching.
Right. Even the Search for Escanta, kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
But you had even mentioned, though, about even some of these multicolored ones. Do you see Journey to Eternity's playing much days?
Or the is it one that basically winds up being
Storm the Vault?
Tolarian Academy when it flips. For whatever reason, it's same thing. That one kind of, I felt like, none of the 2-color ones got nearly as much hype or see as much play as the monocolor ones.
That's very cool. Yeah, that is a good one. I think I've got a copy of that kicking around somewhere. Maybe I gotta slap it in a deck one of these days.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those cards where I've been like, do I kind of want to build a Simic +1 counters deck just to run some of these cards that I like so much but don't have a home for right now?
All right, I think I'm finally going to break us away from the 1/1 counters thing as I reach the tail end of my card selection here. I'm going to pick some more. I've got a couple of niche choices here. I, as an enjoyer, I mentioned about I really love clones, and one time that I had a proper clones deck, the theme of that deck was also snow permanent focused. Because I think these cards that do the sort of snow permanent synergy, it's very fun and cool designs. They're obviously just more like riffs on traditional Magic cards. It's just, they've got an extra subtype added into there as well. So I as just like a niche pull for myself as a snow enjoyer, I'd like to tell you all about my favorite snow creature that falls within our color parameter we're talking about today. That's Abominable Treefolk.
I believe I'm not going to look it up because I was just looking at this recently. Is a power and toughness set by the number of snow either permanents or lands you control?
You're correct. Yes, you're correct.
Okay. I just was looking at it recently for something.
Yeah. So the card itself is 2 green and a blue. It's a star snow creature Treefolk with trample as well. Power and toughness equal to the number of snow permanents you control, and when it enters, you tap target creature an opponent controls, and that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So you get a freeze. You get a big body with trample that tracks everything you've got in play that is a snow permanent, which obviously by itself, because it's a star and it is a snow, it'll track itself obviously as your first point. But what I like with a card like this, as compared to like, say, some other types of cards that modify its own power and toughness based on a parameter of things that you hit, right? Like you had mentioned about like a card that say, oh, this has got power and toughness, like a Beanstalk Giant as an example, sure, that it grows equal to your lands. And that's very good. Those kinds of effects are cool, don't get me wrong. But with Abominable Treefolk, you can not only get this thing larger based on the other snow permanents you've got, just because it simply says snow permanents, all you simply have to have in there is your other snow lands as well. So if you've got an all snow focused deck, this thing is going to have total power and toughness essentially to every permanent you've got in play, like barring other things of like, say, tokens that would be created or other support pieces that aren't snow. Like, with trample naturally on the card as well, like what am I missing here about this thing not being one of the largest beat sticks in Simic?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to, like, in the right deck with snow lands, it's just going to accidentally drop it down and be like a 8/8, like you know, with trample that taps down something. Like that's just like such a good piece of value in a deck, particularly, and it's a fun thing to do. It's a kind of card you don't see very much, and snow is a fun mechanic to play with a little bit, and I like all of those things. That's a combination of what I love about Commander is finding these weird niche cards that work amazingly well in a really hyper-specific deck.
Yeah, my original build was using the Kaldheim god, Jorn, god of winter, as a Sultai. So I was playing all of the green, black, and blue snow-focused cards. Treefolk and Conifer Worm were some of the bigger ones to be able to hit within that deck. But because I was also playing clones, I could have multiple copies of Abominable Treefolk coming in down at once, that each of them would obviously all be seeing each other, plus the lands, and the ETBs would be going off on repeat as well, because every clone gives that freeze effect so that the larger ones that can start attacking, that was a very fun deck. One day maybe I'll rebuild it, but I look at like maybe the opposite end of that as well, to go for a different color combination with Isu the Abominable. You could do like a Bant Blink kind of snow focused deck, so that even if you're not doing clones of the Abominable Treefolk, it gets in with its combat damage, and then you play something during your turn that blinks it out, blinks it in. You get repeated value of the freeze effect and getting card draw off of, or excuse me, not card draw, but extra 1/1 counters off of Isu itself, just because he cares about your snow permanents being cast and entering the battlefield and whatever. It's a very fun little guy. I like him a lot. If as one of these, just like if you need to play just this incrementally larger growing trample threat, I really like Abominable Treefolk.
I actually have a Jorn deck as well, but it's Golgari. I don't have any blue in it. So I can't actually cast in the deck. It's only running black and green lands in effect, because I only use the front half of the card at all. It's a Helix Pinnacle deck, so that's why I'm using it to untap lands to feed into Helix Pinnacle.
Fascinating.
So yes, to get off the, I am also talking about something a little bit niche here and also old. So Fable of a Wolf and Owl is an old card from the original Lorwyn block, and it's 3 and a Simic, so 6 mana total for an enchantment. Whenever you play a green spell, you may put a 2/2 green wolf token into play, and whenever you play a blue spell, you can put a 1/1 blue bird token with flying into play. And so obviously whenever you play a Simic spell, you make one of each. I'm not sure it's necessarily a good card by today's standards at 6 mana, but it's such a fun card. Like, I just love things like that, where you're like, every time I cast a Simic spell in my Simic token deck, I'm going to make 2 tokens. Like, that's just a fun thing to kind of build around even. Like, you know what, I could run this, mono blue thing that makes me a token in this deck, but like, I'm going to try to run as much Simic stuff as I can, so in case Fable of Wolf and Owl is out, it turns into a blow because I'm making so many tokens.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, like especially you mentioned, like I said, with the whole hybrid mana thing about that as well. Is if your spell is both green and blue, it reminds me kind of in the wording of how Ren and Siri Inseparable is, where like if you're doing a changeling type of spell, that legend was going to create you both a cat and a dog because it's tracking both aspects of the card. And obviously I know a lot of the original Lorwyn had a whole bunch of cards that cared about the like colors of spell that you cast. So this obviously thematically makes sense from coming from a set like that. Yeah, it's just that mana cost I feel like is an issue with that. If it maybe were, oh god, I don't even really know. What would you think would be fair for an ability like this if you had to adjust the mana cost? Maybe two less?
Yeah, I feel like particularly today, I think if this came out today, it would probably be 4 mana.
Like 2 and keep the 2 hybrids, or how would you split it? Maybe like 3 and a hybrid?
I think 2 and 2 hybrid, although I'd be tempted to do a 3 and 1, but I think it would wind up being 2 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating though. It's interesting that it makes off like power and toughness tokens as well, right? Like the wolf being like it almost wants you to prioritize playing green spells more, but the evasion part on the bird is just super fascinating. Interesting. It's just this card is fascinating. I don't know how else to describe it, you know?
It feels like the kind of card where, like, if I had a Simic token deck that was good, I would still be like, you know what? I'm just going to run this one card that no longer holds up today because I like it so much. Like, I tend to have decks where I do that, where I'm like, you know what? Everything about this deck is kind of, I've turned the screws to make it a pretty solid deck, but this one card has a soft spot for me, so I'm going to put it in the list just because it gives me joy to cast it. And this is one of those cards.
A figurative and literal pet card being like, this is my pet owl that I created for casting Brainstorm.
Yeah. Yes. Perfect description.
Well, I suppose to that end, for my last card I'd like to talk about is in a very similar boat to yours as well, as a bit of an older pick. I know it kind of just came back a little bit recently with a pre-con deck, a special one. I'll get to what I mean by that in a second here, but this is a guy. This card, I would love to make this work. And I think the ability that it offers, while not necessarily unique to the type of category of card that it is, the trigger that it goes to do is just so uniquely tied to it that I feel like it's one of the icons of Commander that if you can pull off this win condition card of Biovisionary, that like you are just... You're a winner. You are a winner of Simic if you can pull off Biovisionary. Are you familiar with Biovisionary? Have you ever made him work before?
I have never made him work, but it's one of those cards that I've always kind of eyeballed and tried to figure out if I want. So when I built that Helix Pinnacle deck, I wanted to build kind of a hidden commander alt win con deck, and I was down to either Biovisionary, Helix Pinnacle, or Azor's Electors, I think is how it's pronounced.
Azor's Elocutors, yep.
So I was like one of those three, and I'm just looking at all three. I went with Helix Pinnacle, but Biovisionary was on the list of the cards I wanted to turn into a deck that I was going to build entirely around finding that alt win condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Biovisionary just has such an interesting pull for us as Commander people just due to the nature of how Commander is. So for those unfamiliar, Biovisionary is 1 green and a blue for a human wizard is a 2/3, and it just has one line of text on it that at the beginning of the end step, if you control 4 or more creatures named Biovisionary, you win the game. And just that line of text is just so drawing to us for playing Commander, because we already described this once already tonight, but Commander is singleton. So how do you make a win condition card like this work? And it obviously has, like, you got the gears turning of, like, you have to find the card first.
Yep.
Then you've got to have your pieces that create you copies or get you more named version copies of it. There's so many fascinating moving parts that go into figuring out how to make Biovisionary work. Like I know one of the icon classics is just hitting it with Rite of Replication kicked. That's one of the easiest ways to do it. a slow churn with other forms of clones or duplicators of things of that nature. Like, oh, you guys got 3 turns left. I've got 2 Biovisionaries. Next turn around, my extravagant replication. I'm going to make 1 more Biovisionary. Like, it almost feels in that same wheelhouse to mechanized production, where it's like you see it sitting there, and like, here comes 1 more arcane signet. Here comes 1 more arcane signet. Like, you know it's there, and it's not quite threatening yet, but it's that moment that you get there. Is like, here we go, all in. There's my 4 Biovisionaries. But I think, unlike some of those other alt win cons, the thing that I love the most about Biovisionary is his wording on there that he says at the end step. So if you've got the means to get your Biovisionary and the multiple copies of himself, all you have to get to is your end step. Right? Like, most of the other main popular alt win condition cards of the game, they're either like, oh, you got to make it to your next upkeep, or like, this is the, you have to draw and cast the Approach of the Second Sun, or whatever. Like, they require an opportunity around the table for everybody to figure out what the heck you're supposed to do about that card coming up. Biovisionary is not like that. You can just sit it there by itself, and then whatever turn you're ready to pop off with him, you just move to your end step and you win. And that can just catch people off guard. And I love that so much about it.
It can, but it also feels fair at the same time, because, you mentioned replication, but like, that's going to cost you 9 mana, and this has to be into play, and you have to have found it. Not that you can't like set up that big turn and catch people off guard, but you're also producing so much mana that, like, listen, you had a chance to intervene and stop that, and if you didn't, I don't feel remotely bad about winning with Biovisionary, versus something like, say, Thassa's Oracle, where it's really easy to drop that win early on in the game and no one has a chance to respond and absolutely didn't see it coming. Even if you surprise someone with Biovisionary, I feel like you had ample opportunity to keep that from happening, and it feels like a fair, I use that term loosely, but like, it feels like no one's going to get bad vibes from losing to a Biovisionary in a game for the most part, because there's just a lot of inflection points for you to stop it from happening, or for you to have gotten to the point where you can get that win with it. It's a great card. It's kind of like one of those platonic ideals of an alt-win condition, where it's a puzzle for you to figure out how to make it happen, while at the same time giving everyone else chances to stop you from solving that puzzle.
The 2 biggest newer things that I would love to do with a Biovisionary, I would like to start making token copies of one that I have hit with a saw in half. Something just feels right about taking a Biovisionary and splitting it in 2. It's like, hey, I'm looking for 4 clones of myself. But I also would really want to play this in with the new card from Lorwyn Eclipsed. I would love to see this hit with mirror form.
Yeah.
Turn all of your soul ring, turn all your other tokens, and just like, surprise, here's all the Biovisionaries all at once.
Yeah, and again, though, like, that requires a bit of setup. You still have to get the Biovisionary out. You have to have that, there's enough moving pieces there that, like, there's no situation where if I lost to that, I wouldn't feel like, you know what, great, you earned that win.
It's funny. Biovisionary leads to funny stories. And is that not what we are here to enjoy about this game? We are here to have the aha moment of, wow, you made 3 token copies of your Biovisionary when it was sawed in half. You did it.
If you lost to a Biovisionary in a game, you will absolutely tell your other Magic playing friends about that loss. Oh, I lost to a Biovisionary last week. You guys should have seen it. It was super cool. Like, that's what will happen every single time. And that's right. That's what you want to be doing in Commander, is like making stories, making moments.
Yeah, and that to me is like a trademark of an icon of a card. If that card itself is the backbone piece that brings out some of the most creative and fun, not only building exercises, but fun gameplay stories, like, how else can you top that? That's why, for me, Biovisionary, I feel like, is one of my favorite, if not my favorite one, like in my top 5 of all time, definitely one of my favorite Simic cards.
Well, I have a last kind of favorite Simic card here I will throw out here.
Absolutely. Go ahead. We've got time for it.
And a lot of times in decks, I mentioned I like to have like a pet card. Sometimes it'll also be a home run card where it's a card where like I could run all really hyper efficient stuff in this deck, but sometimes on turn 8 you just want to drop this thing that like is seismically impactful in the game. And Biomantic Mastery is the version of that I have in a Simic deck right now, and it's draw a card for each creature target player controls, then draw a card for each creature another target player controls, and it's 7 mana, it's 4 and triple Simic. But you're still probably drawing 6 or 7 cards like in the average game. Someone's got 3 creatures out, someone's got 4 creatures out. The worst case scenario is that's pretty on rate, drawing a card for each mana that gets spent on a spell.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's probably the worst case scenario because I've seen Biomantic Mastery draw 28 before. And there's definitely games where I'm like, man, I wish I had one right now because I would draw most of my library because that Krenko player is, going to blow somebody out next turn. And I've got a propaganda in play, so it's not going to be me. It's a card that can be an absolute home run, and the worst case scenario is you're probably drawing 7 or 8 cards anyway for the mana you spend, which is on rate. It's the kind of card that, Fable of Wolf and Owl to a degree, there's kind of the same thing. That's a lot of mana, and in today's game, most people aren't running 7 mana spells, but I think it's still actually a pretty good piece of value, and the fact that the ceiling is so high on it, I think makes it worth it as kind of your home run card or a pet card in a deck.
I don't really know why, but like when I read a card like this, the immediate first thing that I'd want to play this into is an onboard Chasm Skulker. Like,
sure, right? Yeah.
I don't know why that's the kind of synergy that I want to do. Like, oh, here's my board of creatures that drew cards beforehand, and you're sitting there with all of those 1/1 tokens. Let's go 7 mana. I'm gonna draw 16 cards, 16 counters on Chasm Skulker, right? Like, I don't know. Chasm Skulker is such a great card for a pick like this, something that you just draw a bulk all at once.
It's one I used to have a Talrand Sky Summoner deck that was functionally a token deck. I just cast a lot of like cantrips to make tokens, cantrip to draw cantrip to draw cantrip to draw cantrip, and make as many drakes as I could. But I was always, whenever you'd hear WotC talk about changing the hybrid rule, I was always like, oh, I really want to put Biomantic Mastery in that Talrand deck just so I could draw like 26 cards or something off it.
That's very funny. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that is going to do it for all of our Simic picks for the night. As a whole, closing thoughts. Do you think Simic holds up as one of the better colors in Commander?
I definitely do. I think Simic, like, if you pull the camera back and look at it, like, holistically, it does. Although I do think these Simic cards, the cards that are actually Simic, feel like it's a weaker collection of cards than you get in other color pairs. And I'm kind of shocked by that, given how Simic as a pairing, I would say, is one of the stronger, if not conceivably the strongest color pair among the 10 options. The actual Simic card suite feels weak, much weaker than I would have expected.
Yeah, I have to agree to that end. That was something like I was mentioning about at the kind of the top of the show, that it's like, when you talk about green-blue as a deck, if you've got that color helmed up in your command zone and that's the focus of what your deck is looking to do, you probably are to that degree. You're playing some of the strongest combinations of cards that are both green and blue, maybe a few green and blue ones like we were talking about today. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating, the sort of paradoxical difference that there is here, where green-blue is evaluated as some of the strongest both main commander and support colors, but when you bring the 2 card colors together on a single card, you either get like real niche, like okay ones like Fable of Wolf and Owl, or you get strange paradoxical puzzles like Biovisionary, and it's somewhere in between that spectrum is every other green and blue hybrid focus card that does card draw or counters or whatever. And all of those kinds of things have interesting homes, but it's just fascinating how like different the power scaling is there based on the type of card that it is.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that would be really cool if I was ever in the room with a designer to ask someone at Watts, like, is this an intentional thing, or is this just one of those weird things that just worked out that way? And I would guess it's the latter. I would guess there's not like, we need to make sure we keep combined Simic cards in check. I would guess it's just something that's kind of worked out as a fluke, that the combined Simic cards that they've made over the years just wind up being relatively narrow in focus. And whereas that isn't true of, say, a lot of the Orzhov cards or something. But yeah, I think it's definitely fascinating to see. And I would love to pick a designer's brain about that at some point in time.
Awesome. But now, talking about picking brains, let's pick all of your brains. Let me know and let us know down in the comment section about what your favorite Simic card is. What's your Simic commander deck? What's your favorite Simic pull? I want to hear your Biovisionary stories. Tell me about how you have managed to pop off 4 copies of Biovisionary. I will read every single one of them. As always, I would like to also thank again, Dana, for you being here and jumping in on this. Again, it has been a privilege and an honor to have you along on the show with us today, and it's been such an enjoyable treat to talk to you about all things Simic.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate you letting me be a guest in your house.
Excellent. Yeah. What kind of any kind of like plugs or shout outs you'd like to do as we wrap up the show?
Just the traditional one. I'm on EDH Rec. I write articles for there sporadically. EDH Rec podcast every single week, and I've been doing some social media stuff for Architect and Cardsphere, so you can find me on Architect's Instagram once or twice a week. I'm doing a short there as well. So yeah, online at Dana Roach if you're looking for me for socials. I'm pretty easy to find, and hopefully I will see people at some Magic Cons this year.
Excellent. I know Joseph was kind of trying to talk to us about potentially trying to make one this year, so maybe I will see you. We'll be able to shake hands in person. That'd be so cool. You can find all of us here at the MTG Thoughtcast. You can obviously with the subscribes and comments and likes down below. 5-star ratings on Spotify. Thank you to all of our Spotify listeners. We love and appreciate all of you as well. You can reach out to directly me and Joseph and all of our Thought Monitor friends at the Discord, which is also linked in the description box down below. You can also reach out and find me and our main channel as well. We are on Blue Sky as well. We are at MTG Thoughtcast. Myself, I am John Thoughtcast on there. I don't post there as frequently as I'd like to, but you know, I'm a kind of a social media recluse. It's one of my issues when it comes to being this type of personality. But like maybe that's something we have in common. I suppose you say you're not as social as often as you'd like.
It's probably good for your mental health to spend less time on social media, I would say.
I did. I got rid of Snapchat a couple weeks ago. Like I don't know, kind of like a relief off of that kind of thing. I was kind of barely using it anyway, but whatever. That's off the topic. The point of the topic is thank you so much to every single one of you who have been here listening and watching to us, and we'll see you all again real soon here on the MTG Thoughtcast. Thank you. Have a good night.